that Christ is very familiar with. Part of the evidence that freed him was a hotel receipt that the police had in their possession all along, 24 years of it. And a statement from a hotel staff who remembered him, which the police also had all along, convinced the prosecutors that they sent the wrong person to prison. When he got out, his mother said, I've waited for this so many years. He's 72 years old. I feel like a burden has been lifted. And so I just thought about, how would I feel if something like that happened to me? I'm behind bars, no one's listening to me, years go by, months, days, years go by, and 24 years later, someone knocks on my cell or opens the door and says, you're free. We were wrong. You were right, but it's taken us 24 years to find out. Justice is hard to come by in this world, isn't it? Courts make mistakes, and sometimes innocent people suffer for crimes they did not commit. I'm not saying everybody's innocent. I think, if you do the crime, you need to pay the time. Okay? You need to pay the time. Right? So that's biblical, that's right, and that's what ought to happen. Now that's, we speak about Palm Sunday and Jesus walking in, everybody happy and everything else, but less than a week, on the Wednesday after that, when he walked in on the Sunday, the Wednesday after that, he was before the courts. He was about to be crucified. He had done nothing wrong, uttered no threats, committed no crime, had hurt no one. In fact, he'd helped people. But the powers that be decided to come up with some trump-up charges against him, shuffle him from one hearing to another, and in the end, they got what they wanted. I mean, there were 6 trials. He went through 6 trials. Think about it. Not one, like today, 6 of them. And no one can find anything wrong. He died a criminal's death. He hung between 2 thieves. He didn't deserve to. And so when Isaiah considers the death of the servant of the Lord, he stressed how Christ responded to the unjust accusations, how no one came to his aid, right? And his burial testified to the wrong way he was treated. Now, I want you to never forget that Isaiah is talking 700 years before this happened. And word for word, letter for letter, this came to be. All right, so I want to start looking at these 3 verses, and it tells us about how Jesus reacted or acted in front of his accusers. Because we have a lesson to learn here about our reactions, our actions in front of our accusers. Right? Our accusers. Okay? Now, this was this submissive silence that he had. Isaiah 53 verse 7. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Think about it, okay? He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. Now, twice. It says he opened not his mouth. Same verse, twice. Now, when God writes down in his word something twice or 3 times, what he's saying to us is pay attention. I want you to get this. I know you guys are thick, but I want you to get it. He's talking to me. Don't worry about it. Right? I want you to get it, right? Now, this is what I say. Sometimes we are known by what we don't say. Okay? So here's the thing, right? If everyone else in your room and your area of work and your where you hang out is swearing and blaspheming, they'll know that you don't if you don't do the same. You'll be known for not doing that. Right? Don't do that. Don't follow the crowd. Right? The first lesson is don't follow the crowd. Don't do it because everyone else is doing it. It doesn't justify it in front of God. You can't stand before God and say, well, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I do it? No. You're a child of God. Listen to what he's saying. Openeth not his mouth. Don't do it. Now, Isaiah prophesied that Christ would not open his mouth to defend himself. Would not do it, right? Hundreds of years, 700 years later, it came true. Matthew 26, verse 63. But Jesus held his peace. Matthew 27, verse 12. He answered nothing. Nothing. Mark 15, verse 5. But Jesus yet answered nothing. Nothing. John 19, verse 9. But Jesus gave him no answer. No answer. When Jesus stood before Pilate and Caiaphas, right? When he stood there before Pilate and Caiaphas, he would not defend himself. He did not try to explain himself. Right? In the case of Caiaphas, his mind was already made up anyway. He wanted him gone. The high priest wanted him out of there. He didn't care how he got there. He wanted Jesus dead, gone, away from the place. He wanted all the attention back on where they should be, on him and his crowd. But Pilate was different. See, because he was confused about Jesus' true identity, he didn't have a bias against him. Even Pilate, Jesus would not only speak in order to force him to decide, not to debate with him. Pilate had to decide what to do with Jesus. And in that sense, he stands for all of us. When Jesus is presented to you, when Christ's word is presented to you, when you know about Jesus Christ and as a Saviour, when he stands before you, you either accept him, you either reject him, you either accuse him, you either blame him, but you do something. So Pilate was trying to do something. He tried to decide something. Either if he accepted it, if he had accepted Jesus Christ as being God, right, he would have to then say, look, not only do I find nothing wrong with him, but he's God. What are you guys doing with this guy? I'm going to have to kill you instead of him for touching God. See, we can speculate about Pilate's motives hours on end, but in the end, he could not wash his hands of the guilt of Jesus' blood. See, Jesus spoke to him only to help him come to a decision, to know the truth, that Jesus was innocent. Not only innocent, but he was God, but he knew the truth. In fact, when Peter wrote, when Peter wrote to the beleaguered, scattered, persecuted Christians in the first century, he used 1 Peter 2. He said, for even hereunto, even where you call, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was gall found in his mouth, who when he was reviled, when he was accused, when he was told off, when he was told all the things, right, even then he reviled not, he did not counter back. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Think about it. Think about it for a second. Peter said, there was a time, you understand, that when I was there, right, and I'm going to tell you this, that when Jesus was mocked, when he was spat at, when he was accused, swore at, he said nothing. Nothing. In a book called In His Steps, I'm not sure if you know this book, In His Steps, right? It was written in 1896. Now, it was written by Charles Shaw, who was a newspaper man. And he wrote it based on very unusual premise, which we all know. I'll tell you in a minute what it is. But he said, what would it be like? The book is all about this. What would it be like if in every situation we asked, what would Jesus do? 1896, right? He described a year in the life of an American city where everyone in the city, doctors, lawyers, merchants, salespersons, teachers, students, clergy, and newspaper editors, made that question the basis for all the decision. Think about it. He wrote that in 1896, not long ago. Okay, we're still wearing those bracelets. What would Jesus do? And the whole town, it became an instant bestseller. And in those days, anything written about God was accepted. It was accepted. All right, not like today, where you have to put it through all the media stuff everywhere just to get someone to read it. In those days, books about God were accepted and read as part of life. All right? And today we wear the What Would Jesus Do written way back then. Now, according to Peter, following Jesus means that sometimes we're going to suffer even when we have done nothing wrong. Now, if you do growing in grace, we get to the baptism part. And in the baptism part, it's explained to us that sometime in Bible times, right? In Bible times, when you took a step of obedience and you were baptized, right? See, it was okay until you were baptized to be called a Christian. That was okay. Because it was just a fad. The families would hope that it was just a fad, right? It was just a fad you were going through and it was okay, right? But once you baptize and recognize yourself by the waters that you belong to Christ, your family will cut you off. They would disown you. Now today we're going to see witness of baptism, and what it is just, it's not just, but it's taking a step of obedience. You are doing what Jesus did, the same thing. Now he didn't need to be baptized to show anything. This is God incarnate, but he did it as an example for us. Right? He went through the waters of baptism. Right? Now, when you did that, even though the world thought bad of it and didn't want to do it, that was the right thing to do. So people are going to say, in those days they would say, once you're baptized, you take your surname off me. I do not know you anymore. That's pretty harsh. See, but the greatest honour of any Christian is to be like Jesus. When we suffer unjustly, we share a little tiny portion of what happened to Christ. He did no wrong. He was betrayed, tried, denied. Betrayed, tried, denied, and crucified. Right? Though he never sinned, he was hated by the power brokers who plotted to kill him. Right? The closer to the end of the time on earth comes, the more we're going to be persecuted. Now, people close to us will disappoint us. Some will turn against us. And our response is important. When we are insulted, we answer back this way. Right? That's true. We get on the typewriter. We're on it. Right? We're on the front. We're driving. We do things we shouldn't do. I'm not going to show you. Right? Okay? We get angry. Wind the window, shout, or inside the window, depends on how big the other guy is. Right? We shout. Right? And we tell them off. Right? Okay? And so the natural inclination is to return an insult for an insult. That's what it is. I'm not telling you something you don't know, right? You might not say it out loud, but you say when you get home. That guy, and we get in it. So when they scourged him, he didn't retaliate. When they stuck the crown of thorns on him and put it down, he didn't curse at them. Right? When they drove the nails in his hands and his feet, he didn't threaten them, did he? Nothing. When the bystanders spat at him, he didn't spit back. When they swore at him, he didn't swear back. Right? So you find out what you really believe when others mistreat you. How deep does your love for God go? What are you willing to withstand for him? Sometimes you'll be a better Christian by not saying anything at all. Now, we're going to do a little exercise here. Okay, we're going to do a little exercise. What we're going to do together. Okay, we're going to say it out loud, right? It's not about me. It's not about now. It's all about God. It's all about eternity. So hopefully it'll be. I encourage you to stop and sort of say it, right? And hopefully it will be tattooed on our soul. So when things happen to us, right? When things happen to us, it's not about me. It's not about now. It's about God and it's about eternity, right? So let's say it together, right? Let's try it once at least so that we know how to say it. Okay? We know how to say the words. Okay, let's go. It's not about me. It's not about now. It's all about God. It's all about eternity. I'm not sure. Okay? So let me ask you something. Do you think Jesus was a helpless victim at the day of Calvary? No. Do you possibly think, that's right, do you possibly think that the Son of God, who had the power to call down a legion of angels to set him free, he had but to say the word and all of heaven would come to his aid, right? But he never said that word. Jesus wasn't a victim. He was a silent Saviour who, having all the power in his hands, decided not to use it against those who tormented him. See, when you have the power in your hand, it's not about when to use it, it's about when not to use it. When you hold a gun in your hand, okay, and you know, the background in the army, right? Okay, and they taught me how to use certain weapons, okay? I was pretty good at it too, by the way, and I was pretty good at it, right? And even though I have a bung eye, that's okay. Somehow I got around it. Okay, it's not about when you fire, it's about when you don't fire. That's important. Whether you withhold. All right? Sure, you've got to defend yourself. I'm not saying don't fire against the enemy. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I like you, I'm not going to fight you. The guy's firing at you. Okay, shoot back. All right? But it's about when to withhold. Right? When you go to the police force, they teach you, it's not about when you draw your gun, it's about when you don't draw your gun. It's important. All right? So, listen, it's about when you withhold, right? His unjust sentence was, he was taken from prison and from judgment, and he shall declare his generation, for he was cut off out of the land of the living, for the transgression of my people was he stricken. So, who protested the death of Christ? Who was with a banner saying, no, he's innocent? No one. Who spoke out against the miscarriage of justice of Christ? No one. Who came to his defense and stepped forth and said, no, take me instead? No one. Someone helped him carry the cross. Peter denied him. The apostles fled. But no one stood there and said, no, take me instead of him, he's innocent. In fact, when they said to him, listen, either Jesus or Barabbas, they said, I'll take Barabbas. He's innocent. No one. Of all the major personalities involved in the death of Christ, ironically, it was Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, who showed the most concern for Christ. Think about it. The Roman governor, the governor of the people who are oppressing Jesus' people, showed the most concern about Christ. Unlike his trial before Caiaphas, when he would not defend himself, Jesus engaged a dialogue with Pilate because the governor seemed on some kind of level, right, to have been seeking the truth. At least he came to the right conclusion, right? He said, I find no guilt in him. He's guiltless. In the end, he caved into pressure and sentenced Christ to death. The pressure from the outside. Pressure from the outside can be devastating. To turn your decision because you think it's a better thing to do and you will be left alone is devastating. And you don't get to know that until afterwards. Because you get the relief of not having the pressure on you, but then afterwards when you think about it, you think to yourself, and I'm sure Pilate thought, what have I done here? This guy's going to die, and even though he's a Jew, I can see no guilt in him, and he's going to hang there, and it's my fault. Now, he can drink all he liked, all the wine that he liked, and he probably ended up a drunkard or whatever. He was a governor, he could do whatever he wanted, right? But in the end, he was as guilty as all the others for sending Christ to death. But no one spoke up for Jesus, because no one could speak up for Jesus, because his own people wanted him dead. They were so enraged with Jesus that they were determined to kill him anyway. They were fueled by fear, jealousy over this rabbi from Galilee in the area. They could not control, did not understand. They paid off Judas. They arrested Jesus at night, put him through 6 hearings before morning, and then stood by. The Romans put him to death. I mean, these are his own people. And Isaiah says he was cut off. True right, he was cut off. Now, I want you to understand, Jesus wasn't old. He was about 33 years old when he died and resurrected. By the way, just thought I'd add that in. Right? When someone dies young, girl or boy, doesn't matter, gender. Right? When someone dies young, we all think about, and if you have someone die young in your family, you think about what they could have been, don't you? They could have composed an opera. No one knows. You can't say no because you don't know. Right? They could have written a book. They could have made an amazing discovery. You know, they could have won the Nobel Prize. They might have won an Oscar. right? Or they might have been, a superstar. And so, the sad speculations go on and on and on. And there may be our worst fear that we will die, that someone will die so young, not me because I'm old now, but die so young. That someone would just, died too young, or they went too soon, or the work was unfinished and the dreams unfulfilled. And so, what could have happened? But here's the thing that's a difference. What else did Jesus have left to accomplish? Nothing. Nothing. Jesus finished all he came to do. Only one person in history never left behind any unfinished business. You and I, we're going to get to the end of our lives, and I know for young people, it'll be years and years. I know, I get it, right? Okay, but you can walk out and, the only bus on today could run you on. All right? The only one that's on, all right? But, and so, the name, he's the only person who could come to the end of his life and say with absolute and total truthfulness, I have finished everything I came to do. Now, I want you to note something that in John 19, verse 30. He cried out, it is finished. Right? I have successfully completed the work I came to do. Right? And since Jesus paid in full the price for our sins, the work of salvation, right? He didn't say, I am finished. No, that's right. Because that just simply implied that he died defeated. I'm finished, but there's still work to do. He said, no, it is finished. I've done everything. Everything has been accomplished. It's a finished work. It's total, completed, never to be repeated, not even by Jesus himself. It is finished. It's done. There is no plan B. Plan A worked. The death of Christ was good enough. All right, that's it. There's no more. What can be done? Nothing. What's been done? A way to heaven. What has been accomplished? The death of all, sacrifices by the animals. It's done. Finished. Kaput. There's no other word to put in there. Right? And so we get to this grave. It's interesting because Isaiah 53 verse 9 says, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence. Neither was any deceit in his mouth. He done no violence. How could this be? How could Jesus be assigned a grave with the wicked and yet also with the rich in his death? How can that happen? What can happen to fulfill this? Now, when we went back to visit the old country, right, we went to a place called Recoleta. Now, Recoleta is a cemetery for the heads of state and for the very rich in Argentina, right? And in fact, Eva Peron, he was there and so forth, right? So this is how they bury them. Okay, this is each one, like the whole family's going there, right? And so they build mausoleums for them, for each one of them, and it's all a big, huge cemetery. And in there, you might have the rest of your family, but sometimes just one person. It might be the president of the country, right? And that's how the famous are buried, right? So the wicked and the rich get buried there. And they generally end up in different places, right? Because the truly wicked person might be buried in an unmarked grave, right? And in some obscure corner of the cemetery, like that. We bury the wicked with dishonor and as little fanfare as possible. And sometimes it's understandable. No one wants to have a fanfare for a murderer. I get it. No one wants to remember that. I get that. Right? But the rich and the famous, now we honor with monuments and big plaques, and we talk about them and we put them in places like, Elvis is buried in his own backyard in Memphis, right? And his daughter's there now, right? Lisa Marie's there, right? Buried right next to, or across from his mother. And so they're all going to end up there eventually. It's been looked after, and for generations, and it makes money, so everything's looked after. So 100 years from now, passers-by will visit, and they'll say, "Look, I don't even know what they'll know his music because we play forever, but there's where he is because we know we want to honour them, and we put those things, but we forget the wicked and remember the rich and the famous. That's how man is, right? We've done it through the ages. Now, how could Jesus be counted both with the wicked and with the rich in his burial? It's an interesting prophecy that came true. This fellow called Kendall, he wrote this book that says why Jesus died. And in his book, in pages 151 and 52, if you ever want to buy the book, it's still available, by the way, points out that Jesus fulfilled this prophecy three ways. I want to read you what it says. First, when Barabbas, a genuine criminal, was set free and Jesus quite literally died in his place. Second, when he died alongside the two criminals who were also crucified the day of Calvary. And third, when he died for sinners everywhere by taking their iniquity upon himself. Right? The Lord had laid on him the iniquities of us all. Okay. In Romans 5:8 tells us that Christ died for sinners. In Romans 4:5 even says that God justifies the wicked. Though he lived a sinless life, Jesus died for sinners and thus was assigned a grave with the wicked. Christ died a sinner's death, though he himself was sinless. But where was he buried? In a tomb borrowed from a rich man named Joseph of Arimathea. Thus, even the burial of Jesus fulfilled Old Testament prophecy to the letter. Even though no one could have foreseen it in advance, both the nature of his death by crucifixion and the place of his burial, a rich man's tomb, fulfilled prophecy given 700 years earlier. Now, all of this happened even though Jesus was innocent. No violence, no sin, no lies, no righteous man. The problem that we have in grasping this is because we have no one around us who is sinless to compare with. It's like this. If sin were blue, we'd all be blue all over, right? We'd just be different kinds of blue. There'd be light blue, there'd be dark blue, there'd be sky blue, there'd be powder blue, and there'd be blue through and through because we all sin. Except for Jesus would be white. And we would compare him to us, we could see it. But because we're all, obviously not going to paint ourselves blue, right? Who says we're pale blue? Who says we're dark blue? I mean, you're all dark blue, I get that, but, you know, we wouldn't know. So we have nothing to compare with, right? So therefore, Jesus was pure, he was holy, he was perfect in every way, he never sinned, and even one time. He was tempted, but never fell into temptation. So it's hard for our brain to comprehend what a righteous man looks like, because we never lived with a righteous man amongst us, right? And we, the unrighteous, the blue, crucified him. So his reward for doing God's will was a bloody Roman death on a cross. Here's the wonder of grace at work. From the murder of a perfect man came God's plan to rescue the human race. Think about the grace that involved in that. Christ died for us while we were yet still sinners. Right? Romans 5:8. Right? I want you to concentrate on the little word yet, because he didn't die for us while we were yet church members. He didn't die for us while we were yet good people, or law-abiding citizens, or nice neighbours, or very high achievers at work. Right? But he died for us while we were still lost in our sin and far away from God. Okay? Yet is important. Words are important where they're placed. It's not a mistake, it was placed there. God meant it to put it there, to tell us that we were yet in such a muck and a bad place, he died for us. So how do we do it? How do we take advantage, if you put it that way, of that? Because the door of heaven is marked for sinners only. There's none righteous, not one. We need to reach out. We need to reach out to Christ. Isaiah 1:18 says, "Come now, and let us reason together with the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool." Right? And then it says in 1 John, as wool. In 1 John 1:7 it says, "And the blood of Jesus Christ, Son, cleanses us from all sin." All sin. Words are important. Not some sin, all sin. All sin. See that? Words are important. Where they're placed are important. That's why the Holy Spirit never made a mistake with our Bible. That's why the Bible and the words that are placed in the Bible are important for where they are. Now, if that was changed around and it said for some sins, we'd have to clarify which ones. What if I didn't commit that sin? He didn't die for me. What if I only did half of that sin? Well, he could have halfly died for me. But for all sin. So he died for me. See, and the good news is that what we couldn't do for ourselves, God has done for us through the death of his Son. And the only thing is to believe and to accept. Silence amongst all the accusation and everything that was going on around him was fulfilled. The prophecy of silence. Think about it. The prophecy of silence was fulfilled at the most horrendous time of Jesus' life. Where he could have pointed the finger and said, hold on, guys, wait a minute. Take it easy here because I can reveal all the sins that you have done in your lifetime. Let alone just now what you're doing to me. But he kept quiet, shut up. Why? Because that's what was meant to happen. God foreordained it to happen. And Jesus followed God's with obedience. Obedience. In the harshest, worst time of his life, he obeyed God. Think about it. He obeyed God in the worst time of his life. And sometimes we think we have it hard. Right? And we don't want to obey God. Because it's hard for us. And we want to rebel and tell God why and how and when and all those things. And I say to you, what we need to do is to go back, right? To go back to that and say, it's not about me. It's not about now. It's all about God and it's all about eternity. And zip it. Zip it. Yes, this is not right. Yes, I'm being accused. Yes, it's the wrong thing. Yes, I've been told. Yes, it's all, I'm in the right. I'm in the right. I know God will back me up. I know I'm in the right. I could prove this. It's not about me. It's not about now. It's all about God. It's all about eternity. It's all about eternity. And so when we get there and God says, oh, come on in. Listen, you know that time when you were being accused and harassed and spoken and told off? Thank you for not opening your mouth. You've done a great service to my testimony through your life at that time. Just like Jesus did. Just like Jesus did. Let's close our eyes and bow our heads for a second.